Okay, so this is the review sheet for digestion. So let's have a little look at our answers. So first of all, we've got, why do we need to digest food? We need to digest food then to break down large insoluble molecules. And if we're not sure what insoluble means, it means it cannot dissolve. So we won't be able to dissolve into our bloodstream. So we break down large insoluble molecules into small soluble molecules. So soluble, then obviously it can dissolve. That can be easily absorbed by the body. That is something that we need to know. We can't just write down to break down food, okay? We need to make sure that we write large insoluble molecules into small. And the reason then is that we can absorb it into our bloodstream. Then we've got, how do the following enzymes work? Well, we have, first of all, carbohydrates as an enzyme, and it breaks down starch. Just going to find starch, going to break starch down, and it's going to break it down into glucose. And we know that glucose is our posh word for sugar. Then we have our enzyme lipase, and that's going to break down our fatty foods, so our fats. And it breaks down fats into fatty acid and glycerol. Then we have a protease enzyme, which breaks down proteins into amino acids. And as we go along, then we'll find out what actually happens to our broken down nutrients. Then we have our digestive system, which we need to be able to label. So at the top, then we have our mouth, that is where digestion starts. Then we have the thing below that, we have our epiglottis, I think, from what I can see. And that then is the flap that covers our trachea. So when we swallow food, it goes down our esophagus, which then leads us to our esophagus down here, which connects the mouth to the stomach, and it forces food down the esophagus through contractions called peristalsis. Okay. Then we have bottom, then we have our stomach. Okay, next to the stomach we have our liver, and in front of the liver we have our gallbladder. It's very, very small, quite hard to see, but it is there. Then I'm going to go through what the functions of them are after. Behind the stomach and the liver then we have what looks like a leaf, and that is our pancreas, which then from the stomach then food will leave the stomach and it will enter our small intestine, which is all around here. From the small intestines then it will go into our large intestine, then into our rectum where it will sit until we go to the toilet, and then we have our anus where excretion happens. Then if we look then at what happens in the following places, we have the mouth, so that's where mechanical digestion takes place. We start to break down our food. We use our teeth and we chew it into smaller pieces, so when it's easier for us to swallow. Inside the mouth then, our saliva also produces an enzyme amylase, which is a type of carbohydrates. And we use that then, and it starts to break down starch in the mouth. We have our stomach then, and our stomach contains hydrochloric acid, so our HCl, and it is there to kill any bacteria and germs that we ingest into our stomach. And also then the lining of our stomach will contract, and it will churn the food to make sure all of it gets digested. We have our pancreas as our next organ, and it produces our digestive enzymes. It produces those enzymes of carbohydrates, lipase and protease. We have our small intestine. In the small intestine, it is where digestion is completed. Digestion stops in the small intestine because everything is broken down. So what happens then, we have absorption of nutrients. We have absorption of glucose, of fatty acids and glycerol, and of our amino acids. They are absorbed back into the blood. And our small intestine is adapted for that because it has lots of villi and microvilli to increase our surface area. Then from the small intestine, our food passes into our large intestine, or it's now our stool, and then we have any absorption of water. So any excess water gets absorbed back into the body in the large intestine. And our liver is important because it produces bile, and we'll go on in a second to find out what bile does. We then have how does it move through the body? The answer's there. It moves through movements known as peristalsis, as we said, and they are contractions that force the food through our digestive system. If we go up, okay, and then let's look at food tests. So how do we test? So what do we use iodine for? Benedict's and burette. So we have, first of all, the iodine solution. So we use iodine solution to test for starch. And what happens then if starch is present, our iodine will turn from orange and it will go that dark blue, black colour. We then have our Benedict solution, which is used to test for glucose. And if glucose is present in a food sample, it will turn from blue and it will go orange to brick red. If we are saying brick red, make sure we use the word brick, don't just write red because you won't get a mark for it. Then we have burette solution, and we use burette solution to test for proteins. If protein is present in your sample, burette will turn from blue to a purple or a lilac colour. Then we've got, where is bile made? Bile is made in our liver, and then it is stored in our gallbladder. And then what is the function of bile? Well, the first thing it does, it neutralises stomach acid. So after you have food, your liver will produce bile and release it into the stomach, where it will neutralise your stomach acid. If you eat your food too quickly and you get heartburn, that's because we have a lot of stomach acid and bile hasn't had time to break it down. It also emulsifies fats. We can't use the word breakdown, we have to say emulsifies fats. Because what happens, fat is the hardest food molecule to break down because it's large. So what happens then is that bile will break down the fat molecules into smaller pieces, but they are still fat molecules, okay? Just think of it of having a large dairy milk bar, and the bile will break down those bars into the individual squares, but it's still essentially a bar, a piece of dairy milk, okay? It hasn't changed. Then we've got explain how Viscin tubing model works, okay? So the Viscin model then shows diffusion of small soluble molecules. It shows how our small molecules like glucose, fatty acids, amino acids are able to diffuse into the bloodstream through our semi-permeable membrane, because the Viscin tube, it represents the membrane of the small intestine, okay, where our nutrients are absorbed, okay? And so only small molecules, if we had starch, for example, starch wouldn't pass through because it's a too large of molecule. What's the problems then with the Viscin model is that it hasn't got that large surface area, because as we mentioned, that the small intestine, it has villi, which will increase the surface area, where our Viscin tube doesn't. So it's not 100% accurate to demonstrate it. Then if we look then what happens to the following foods, we've got fatty acid and glycerol, glucose and amino acids. So what do we need them in the body for? Why are we breaking them down, and what do we use them in the body for? We use fatty acid and glycerol for insulation, keep us warm, and also then protection of organs. You could be the skinniest person, but your organs will still have fat around them, okay? And it's just to protect them from, if anyone bumps into you, for example, just to protect our organs. And then we have glucose, okay, which shows our sugar, and we use that in energy through respiration. Energy is released during respiration, and we need glucose for respiration. Then we have amino acids, and amino acids are needed for growth and repair of our cells. Then what does the term balanced diet mean? Okay, it's eating a variety of food groups needed for your age and gender, because remember then, depending on how old you are and what gender you are, you will need a different variety of food groups and essentially a different percentage of each of them for what you need. So why do you need a balanced diet? Well, obviously for a healthy body to be healthy, and it's also important for chemical reactions in the body. We need certain nutrients, minerals, etc. for chemical reactions in our body. Without them, then we won't be able to perform them effectively. Okay, then what happens if we have too much energy in our food, so that's too much sugar? It can lead to obesity and type 2 diabetes. Not type 1, that's where the body doesn't produce insulin. It's for type 2 diabetes. And then what happens if we have too much sugar, fat or salt in our diet? We have sugar, which we've already gone through then. We have obesity, and it can lead to type 2 diabetes. If you have too much fat, then it can also lead to obesity. And if we have too much salt in our diet, it will lead to high blood pressure. Okay, so that should be the end of our review sheet of digestion for you.